So you're in the market to buy a new car, but not sure whether to buy a car outright, get a loan, or lease. In this video, I want to explain the ways we can lease and buy a car, as well as the associated costs and the pros and cons of each. Let's start with leasing. In Australia, there are 3 ways in which you can lease a car. The first way is finance leasing. Finance leasing is mostly used by businesses. So this is where the finance provider or lender buys the vehicles and then leases or rents them out to a company for a set period of time, generally 2 to 5 years. At the end of the lease term, the company renting the car has 2 choices: to either buy the car at the residual value, to own the car outright, or to just renew the lease with a new car. So the aim for the finance providers or lenders are to keep the company renting the car, which keeps payments flowing back to the finance provider. But if the company doesn't choose to renew the lease, they still have to pay the residual value of the car, which will be quite a chunk of money. This might include other fees as well. The second way is novated leasing. Novated leasing is more technical but pretty straightforward once you understand how it works. So I'll try keep it really simple. A novated lease is essentially an agreement by you, your employer, and the finance provider, who will provide you with the car. So your employer will have to agree to a novated lease first. Then once your employer has agreed, your employer might have the right to choose which finance lender you will get the car from, and then they will pay the repayments to the finance lender using your pre-tax salary. So this means your employer will be totally responsible for making the repayments on your behalf. So by making payments from your pre-tax salary, we call this salary sacrificing, and has the benefit of lowering your taxable income, meaning less tax to pay. But, your employer might have fringe benefit taxes doing a novated lease. So be very aware that your employer might deduct these costs out of your pay. Your employer doesn't need or want any more costs, so making sure you get some professional advice on this issue is definitely key. And the third leasing option is operating lease. An operating lease is shorter in the lease term, but is designed to keep you leasing for a longer period of time. With this type of lease, you do not have the option to buy the car outright at the end of your lease term. Instead, you return the car back and generally upgrade to a new car with a new lease term. Now that you have an understanding of the leasing options, let's see what the pros and cons are for leasing a car. So there's a few benefits like lower initial costs to get the car. This means you won't need much savings. Also, all the costs will be rolled into one monthly payment, and maintenance costs are generally covered in the monthly payment also. And if you lease through your company or do a novated lease, there will be tax benefits, which in turn lower your taxable income. But most importantly, we need to look at the cons of leasing. Starting with when you lease a car, you don't own the car. So damages, mileage, wear and tear will all incur a fee if you decide to buy the car at the end of your lease term. But definitely the most important thing to think about here is your monthly payments. Do you really want to have consistent monthly payments coming out of your account for the next 5 years, then another 5 years after that, and on and on? The whole purpose of a lease is for the finance company to keep you locked into their trap of keeping you making payments and renewing your lease term. So think about whether you want to continue filling the pockets of these companies or not. With that said, let's now look at what buying options we have. First one is buying the car with a loan from the bank. Doing it this way will mean you'll have to approach the bank and they will check your credit to see if you meet the requirements to be approved. Once approved, you will have options on how long the loan term will be. This could be 5, 7, or 10 years. By doing it this way, you will make payments with interest until the loan is paid off in full. Then you will own the car. And the second option is car dealership financing. This is where the dealership you buy the car from will offer you a loan. This is pretty much the same deal as a bank loan, but might have a higher interest rate. And the third option is to pay cash for the car. And there's not much to explain here. This is just where you pay for the car with the money you have saved, meaning you won't pay any interest or any other associated fees that come with loans or leasing. Okay, so what are the pros and cons of a bank and car dealership loan? So the pros will be that you can spread the cost over time, making it more manageable. And you also don't use a significant portion of your savings at once. And the cons would be you'll pay interest, increasing the overall cost of the car. And approval will depend on your credit worthiness. Now lastly, let's look at the pros and cons of paying cash for a car. One con for buying a car with cash, and that's simply using savings that you might need for other things and the time it will take you to save for the car. And the pros would be not having to pay interest and owning the car outright with no ongoing payments tied to the car. Now you have the complete lowdown on all the ways you can buy a car. So what's the best deal for you? Well, that depends on your situation. Do you want continued payments that come with leasing or getting a loan? Or do you want to take the time and buy a cheap car, then continue to save and buy the car you really want later down the track with cash and no payments? As a single dad, I know exactly what I'd be doing, and that's delayed gratification by saving and buying a cheap car, then repeating the process and upgrading along the way with cash. In today's society, delayed gratification seems too hard for people to wrap their heads around, and the want now and deal with it later culture has been brainwashed with marketing and ads to get people trapped into ongoing payments. So if you're like me and want the least amount of stress and debt in your life, then maybe think about taking the time to save and pay cash. I think the costs in the long run outweigh the short-term benefits of leasing and loans. Well, I hope you got some helpful tips from this video. If you did, maybe consider subscribing, and I'll see you on the next one. Peace.